Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. And here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your utility bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up an everyday conversation from job interviewing to dating to debating politics, whatever it may be, but everyday language that you use in your respective countries of origin and your native tongues, but here in Israel with modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. If you have any requests from us that we haven't covered already or you'd like us to review, please be in touch with us. You can either write in the chat if you're joining us live on Zoom, or you can email us at nefeshbenefesh. It's hebrew@nbn.org.il. And you can find all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. And for the last several lessons, you can also see the vocabulary sheet that we go through with each lesson. For those of you who joined us last week when we went over cell phone bills, thank you again for your cooperation as we had some technical difficulties during the class. And likewise, we will be sending out a copy of that video with both the vocabulary and the bill that we referenced in due time, both because of technical difficulties and also because Nefesh B'Nefesh has a big event coming up. It's a little delayed, but don't worry, we will get it to you. So thanks in advance for your patience. I said, as this is our last session of this last class in our winter session, we're going to be taking a break starting after this class through Pesach, Passover, and you'll join us again in mid-April, right before Yom HaShoah. We are going to, first off, you can always review during that time. And on youtube.com, just type in Cafe Oleh and you'll see our entire playlist of past classes up there, so you can go back and review. You can be in touch with us as we're looking to fill out our spring and summer sessions. So we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. But I also mentioned that because next week is Purim, that we would be covering Purim. I also recognized we've done a great lesson in the past on Purim on YouTube. That's up on YouTube. So you can go back, watch it. You can hear all about what kind of milui you want in your Oznei Haman, and where to hear a Ra'ashan, and where to see the best Adlo Yada. If you don't know those words, check out our class on Purim on Cafe Oleh. But I thought instead, we close out the semester with everything that's going on here in Israel, with news and whatnot, and social movements, whatever you think about them, right? We're not here to be political, but certainly to understand what's happening and find our own voice, whatever that may be. I thought we'd take a minute and do something a little bit more cultural in the context of what's happening and talk about the history of protest songs in Israel. Protest is nothing new to Jews. We can go back to the Torah and Israelites, Bnei Israel in the wilderness complaining. We can certainly go to the Nevi'im, the prophets, talking about what the people and the kings are and are not doing according to what God wants. So it's and plus, the stereotype about Jews complaining. Whatever that may be, in Israel, we do have a culture of protest that has been around even before the state of Israel being founded. And today what I want to do is look at a few songs that are classic in Israeli culture. Regardless if you believe what they are saying or not saying is irrelevant. These are classics. And remember, we teach Hebrew, modern Hebrew, in an Israeli context. So understanding Israeli culture is key to understanding Hebrew. We're not learning a language in a vacuum. We're learning it with a context. So we're going to look at a few examples today. I'm not going to go through all protest songs in Israeli society, both because we don't have enough time, and also they will start getting more and more partisan. And that's not really the point, though, today. We're going to actually look at one in full depth and translate it together. It's one of the most popular, well-known, well-recognized songs in Israel that also happens to be a protest song. We're going to translate it together because the Hebrew happens to be relatively easy. But I'm going to give you a few examples first, and maybe some of these you already know. So to get started, Here's a classic one, and we're looking at a website called Shironet. Shironet is a compendium, it's an archive of basically every Hebrew language song that's ever been written, mainly focusing on modern Israel, but pretty much everything. And when there's a sound clip of it on YouTube, they also post it here. So you can look for anything here. Even if you don't know the name of a song, you can write in a few words of it and you get all the different background on it. It's a great website, those of you who are as obsessed with Israeli music as I am. This is also just a great Wikipedia style rabbit hole to just go and explore all sorts of things. This is a song from 1969. Probably many of you know this song. You may not know how political and protest it is in its core, but we're just going to listen to a few lyrics of it to give some background to what we're talking about. So this song is called Shir LaShalom, Song for Peace. And it was sung by Le'akat HaNachal. You can see that on the right-hand side here, and I'm going to highlight it. Shir LaShalom is the name. And it's followed by the performers. Le'akat HaNachal translates to the Nachal Entertainment Group. Now, remember, first few decades of Israel, economically, Israel was not doing well. It didn't have many friends. It didn't have many trading partners, everything. And it was fighting multiple wars and multiple security threats at once. So everything was diverted primarily to keeping the country alive, primarily through the military. So as a result, even though there are recordings of musicians from the 40s, 50s, and 60s in Israel, the biggest, most popular artists were often from the army, and they served their time in these entertainment troops. Each major battalion in Israel, major unit, had their own entertainment group. So there was Le'akat HaNachal, there was Le'akat Pikud HaTzafon, the Northern Command entertainment troop, same for the Southern Command and the Central Command, and for the Navy and the Air Force. And a lot of the classic songs that we know related to Israeli culture come from these lehakot. Lehakot is a troop with a U. Okay, Le'akat HaNachal is Nachal, for those of you who don't know the full formation of the IDF, of the Israeli military, is a combat unit that spends its time, or spent many years, both fighting in combat on front lines and also creating new towns and villages throughout Israel. And it was seen as a direct outpost of the kibbutz movement of for many decades, but in the military. So it has both very Zionist feel, but also, because it comes from the kibbutz movement, which is affiliated with socialist trends, more left-wing, how shall we say. And so this song really encapsulates that. I'm just going to play the first few seconds of it just to hear the first stanza and talk a little bit more about it, and just make sure that we can enable this for audio so you can hear as well. And we're going to translate it together, don't worry. But I am going to highlight it here on the right-hand side as you see it being sung. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Song keeps going. I'm sure many of you recognize the song. It's a very well-known song. Most notably, it was the song that Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was singing live with that singer, Miri Aloni, in what is now Kikar Rabin, at the time called Kikar Malchei Israel in center Tel Aviv. in 1995 prior to just being assassinated. So it has a lot of meaning and symbolism behind it. But what is this song? Listen, you heard not just the lyrics, and we're gonna go to it, but that sound of it, right? It sounded like 1969. Those of you who either were alive at that time or know music from the 1960s and 70s, it sounds like that. It's rather contemporary for Israeli standards. But let's look at these lyrics. תנו לשמש לעלות, לבוקר להאיר, הזקה שבתפילות אותנו לא תחזיר. Okay. תנו לשמש לעלות. תנו לשמש לעלות, let the sun rise. תנו means let. לתת means both to give, but also to allow or to let, and this is the command sense. So תנו, let, לשמש, let the sun, לעלות. We all know this word, comes from the same root as aliyah, to rise, right? To go up. So to rise, let the sun rise. Laboker lehair. For the morning to be lit up. Okay? Or for the sun to light up the morning, however you want to see it. This is as much parallel phrasing, parallel lines, which is very common in Hebrew and Middle Eastern poetry, as it is just referring back to the sun. So let the sun rise to light up the morning. La boker, for the morning. Lehair. Lehair is to illuminate, to make light. It comes from the same root as ol. But even if you didn't know anything, right, you know something's going on here because of that very 1960s sound at that intro, that build-up sound. But listen to those lyrics again. Tnu lashemesh la'alot, let the sun rise. What does that sound like? That sounds like the lyrics from that classic 1960s or 1970s musical Hair, Let the Sun Shine In, right? And that was all about counterculture, revolution, protest against the Vietnam War. So we know there's something happening here that's relating back to that. Because songs don't just start, aren't just written in a vacuum, just like we were talking about language. There's something happening here. Hazaka shebat filot otanu lo tachzir. Okay, hazaka shebat filot. Zaka, zach means the purity, the clarity. So the clarity that shebat filot, that are in prayers, hazaka shebat filot, what won't they do? Otanu lo tachzir. They, I'm sorry, the purity in prayers, the purity of prayers, will not return us, meaning return us to a better time or a different, older time, right? Tachzir is the causative form of the verb lachzor, so will not cause us to return. Otanu, right? Will not cause otanu, us to return. So altogether, let the sun rise to light up the morning. The purity in prayers will not return us. So what are they talking about here, right? Something is against bat filot. The hazaka shebat filot otanu lo tachzir, right? The purity in prayers won't return us. And I'm going to skip forward to the chorus, which I'm not going to play, but you probably recognize. Lachen rak shiru shir lashalom al tilchashu tefillah. Therefore, just sing a song of peace. Lachen, therefore, rak, just, shiru, sing, as in command, shir l'shalom, a song for peace, al tilchashu tefillah, don't whisper a prayer. Okay, as much as this song was both pro-peace, which was very revolutionary in 1969 Israel. And this is coming from an army entertainment troupe. Think about how even more scandalous that is, right? This is talking about peace. We need peace. We want peace. It's also saying, don't pray. Hazaka shebat filot otanu lo tachzir. The purity of prayers won't return us back. And don't whisper a prayer. It's better to sing a song of peace. Betze'aka gdola, in a loud scream, yelp. Okay, so this song that many people know and is very much held in esteem by people against war, but also for peace, also has this anti-religious sentiment to it that makes it even more controversial. At the time, it was very popular. It has since become very polarizing in Israeli society. But this song is still very well known, both because of its 1960s context, and thus many people of that generation, baby boomers, connect with it. And therefore, a lot of our understanding of Israel comes through songs like these, but also how important it is in the 90s in talking about the peace accords and so forth. So again, this isn't about whether you like or not like the song. This is giving you a context to a very central song in Israeli standards, even if you don't hear the song on a regular basis. This is one of many protest songs. Even if it wasn't written as such, it certainly had the underpinnings of it, both for peace and against war, but also this religious notion, this very classic Zionist secular notion of don't pray, that's not helping us, sing for peace instead. Okay, let's look at another song here. And just like this one, we're just going to listen to a few lyrics. We've talked about this song before, and it includes a great army slang term. This song is called Shtei Etzbaot Mitzidon, literally two fingers from Sidon, the Lebanese town of Sidon on the Mediterranean coast. The song is from 1982, if I'm not mistaken. This song was written as part of the soundtrack of a movie with the same name, Shtei Etzbaot Mitzidon. And etzba here literally doesn't mean a finger. It's a unit of measurement. So if you're in the army and you're looking at a map, perhaps 2 fingers away from Sidon is a way to think about it. And the song is about a soldier's experience during the First Lebanon War. This song is very much affiliated with Yom HaZikaron, with Israel's Memorial Day. We hear this song a lot during that time. We're going to go through a little bit of it together, but just like we did with the other song, I want you to listen to the sound of it as well as the lyrics, which we'll translate together.
שתי אצבעות מצידון, אני יושב בדיכאון, כל היום סיור שמירות, מסתכלים על מי לראות, רואה ילדה יפה בכפר, ובך אני נזכר. רחוק מהלב, שכחת אותי וזה כואב, חושב עלייך המון, חייל שבוז בלבנון.
Okay, so first off, what does it sound like, right? It's slow. It's sad, it's a bit melancholy as well, and it very much reflects the lyrics. So let's look at some of these lyrics together. Shtei etzbaot mitzidon, ani yoshev b'dikaon. So literally 2 fingers from Sidon, but we know fingers here is meant to be a unit of measurement. So he's in proximity to the town of Sidon. During Mivtza Shlom HaGalil, the Operation Peace in the Galilee, First Lebanon War. So 2 fingers away from Sidon, ani yoshev b'dikaon. I sit b'dikaon, in depression. Dikaon means depression, not as in a depression in the ground, but depression mentally, emotionally. Okay, so I'm sitting here depressed. Kol hayom siur shmirot. Every day, siur, a patrol. Shmirot, shifts, or right, when you're on and off duty. Mistaklim al milirot. Remember, this is coming from a wartime song from a wartime film. Mistaklim al milirot, looking, mistaklim al milirot, on whom to shoot. Lirot is to shoot. Okay, רואה ילדה יפה בכפר. I see a beautiful girl in the village. ובך אני נזכר. And I recall you. And you I recall. Okay? So it's a guy, he's sitting by himself on patrol, nervous as to whom to shoot. And the film goes into the complication of not only that war, but also how complicated Lebanese society was and how complicated that war was, intervening in Lebanon's civil war. So that's where that line, mistaklim al mi lirot, looking at whom or for whom to shoot at, not knowing who represents what side and who's on our side and who's not. Okay. So, but we know at the end, he's recalling some woman, some female, by seeing this Yalda Yafa Bakfar, this beautiful girl in the village. And it says, Rachok me'ha'ayin, rachok me'alev. Far from the eye, ayin, rachok, far, so far from the eye, rachok me'halev, far from the heart. Shachacht oti v'ze ko'ev. Shachacht oti, you forgot me. Female, referring to this woman he's reminded of. V'ze ko'ev, and that is painful. Choshev alayich hamon, I think about you a lot. Chayal shavuz bilvanon. So we've had this word shavuz before, and shavuz is a military term, meaning very tired, exhausted, beyond exhausted. And we've talked about that it is an anagram, it is an acronym, an acronym for an expression that's not so wholesome. I'll just say it in Hebrew, shavur zayin, which means one's male genitalia is broken. And it's used in army slang to mean someone who's completely exhausted. It has catched on, as you see here in modern Israeli society, as a term that's used. We often talk about shvizut yom aleph. Yom aleph meaning Sunday. Shvizut is the act of being, or the state of being shavuz. So shvizut yom aleph is the equivalent of the Monday blues or manic Monday, meaning you come back to the office after Shabbat, after Sof Shavua, and you're completely exhausted. We call that state shvizut yom aleph. Okay, so chayal shavuz bil-Levanon, a completely exhausted, spent soldier, chayal bil-Levanon, in Lebanon. Okay, this song goes on to talk about how sad he is, how depressed he is, and it includes the line, I'm not going to play the whole song again because we have another song to get to. Ma osim la'azazel, what are we doing? What the hell are we doing? Ma osim, what are we doing? But la'azazel, we've talked about la'azazel before in terms of blessings and curses. La'azazel in modern Hebrew means what the hell, right? What the hell are we doing here? Okay, by the way, if you're thinking I'm being very partisan here, one another, this is one of the most popular movies in Israeli history. So there is some reflection here that this was a mainstream film. We still hear this song when on Yom HaZikaron, and also more pointedly when something sad or tragic happens in Israeli society. In real time, most of the radio stations will turn to more somber, sad music. This is one of those songs that potentially can be played. Okay, so we've seen here two examples of protest songs. They may not sound like the protest songs you're used to in your countries of origin. They may be they may be slower and sadder. They may be more nuanced, and they're not talking directly about what they're against. And there are those examples in Israeli culture. For example, there's a song by Hadag Nachash called Zman Lehitorer. It's the time to wake up. They also have another classic protest song called Shirat HaSticker, the sticker song, which is comprised of all the partisan ideological bumper stickers one sees on cars throughout Israel. And that's all the lyrics are. And it shows just how built up it is and how in that respect. There's other ones to do. We're going to look at one also from the 1980s. Being a millennial, you'll just have to deal with 1980s music. But this is one of the more classic songs, I would say, that what is interesting about this song is that as opposed to those other ones, this one you will hear on a regular basis on Israeli radio. You'll hear it referenced to and sung by people of various backgrounds. both left and right, whatever that means, secular, religious, of Ashkenazi or Mizrahi or Sfaradi backgrounds, all sorts of different people know this song. It's from the 1980s. The song is called Ezo Medina by a singer named Eli Luzon. This was his biggest hit of all time. He has other hits. This became a classic in Israeli culture. What we're going to do is we're going to listen to the first chorus and stanza, and then we're going to translate it together and then go back to the song. But I want you, again, pay attention to the sound of the song as well as the lyrics, which we're going to translate together. So first, I'm just going to play the first few minute and a half or so of the song.
המדינה נלחצת, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה מיוחדת במינה, ממשלה לוחצת, מדינה נלחצת, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה. אנשים בוכים, מחירים עולים, לשלם מיסים וגם קופת חולים. אין כבר עבודה, הקופה ריקה, אין ממה לחיות, סגרו את הלשכה.
Okay, we're going to stop here and translate what we have so far together. Okay, so let me open up. We'll get back to the song, don't worry. It's certainly hard not to sing along, if not tap to that song. Because again, listen, what did you hear in that song, right? A very different sound, much more up-tempo, much more, a different sound altogether. If Shir LaShalom sounded like 1960s hippies, and the 80s song sounded like the 1980s, but a slow, sad ballad, that was a very different sound, right? It was, yes, 1980s synthesizers, but it was very, what we call in Israel, either musica mizrachit, literally Eastern or Oriental music, or a musicat yam tichonit, Mediterranean music, right? This subculture, this genre of music we have in Israel that combines Greek, Turkish, Arab, Persian, Middle Eastern, North African music into this very Israeli sound. So a lot of synthesizers, a lot of pronunciation that's specific to Jews coming from Muslim countries, and it's upbeat. It's a fast tempo, but it's definitely not an upbeat song. So let's start translating the words together. We'll go back to listen to the rest of the song. So first off, Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina. Ezo or Eze normally means which, but when we use it like this, and we've talked about this before, when you say Eze Yofi, means that's wonderful, right? It means like what a, right? So in this case, what a country. Medina means state, but it also means what a country. State and country in this point are being used interchangeably. So what, right? What a country. If I can get it right to read in English, what a country, what a country. Ezo Medina miyuhadet b'mina. Now, what's interesting is, again, this is Eli Luzon. His family emigrated from Libya. So he grew up in a family that pronounced the letter chet as het. And what typifies Musica Mizrachit, this genre of music, is pronouncing Hebrew the way that parents and grandparents and ancestors from Muslim countries did, which is to say the letter Chet, which is the standard pronunciation in modern Hebrew, as Het, and to say the letter Ayin as Ain. Okay, so you're going to hear that here as well. So that typifies it, much like, for example, country Western music in America has to have that certain drawl to it to typify it, right? Same thing here. So as I'm reading it out, I'm also trying to connect with what he's saying. So he says, Ezo Medina meyuchedet b'mina, but it's Ezo Medina meyuchedet b'mina. What a country. Okay, same thing. Miyuchedet b'mina. Miyuchedet b'mina is an expression. Miyuchad means special. B'mina, mina comes from the word min, which means gender or type. And so what it's saying here is Ezo Medina miyuchedet b'mina, one of a kind. It's so special. It's special unto itself, or literally one of a kind. What a country, it's one of a kind. Okay, Mimshala lochetzet medina nilchetzet, as he sings. But Mimshala lochetzet, Mimshala government, lochetzet pushes or pressures, right? Lilchotz is to push, lachatz is pressure. So the government exerts pressure. Medina nilchetzet. We've talked about many times the role of passive versus active verbs. In Hebrew, this is a great example, right? Mimshala lochetzet, the government pushes. Medina nilchetzet, the state, the country is pushed, is pressured, right? So it uses the same verb that it began this line with, but in the passive form. So the government pushes, the state or the country is pushed. Okay. Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina. Right? What a country, what a country. Again, what a country, what a country. So to put this in perspective, this song came out in 1983, I'm not mistaken, 1983, 1984. What was happening in 1983 Israel? Israel faced one of its worst economic crises ever. It's a long story. It's worth reading about because it helps understand why Israel is the capitalist system it is today. It explains how the banks work, why there's so many startups, but essentially the banking system collapsed in Israel. The banks were reselling their stocks at a incorrectly valued price. And it got to the point that the banks basically collapsed. The Tel Aviv Stock Exchange was closed for 18 days. Inflation was rampant. It went up to, it was upwards of 400%. It went up even higher. There was a massive economic plan pushed in 1985 that, among other things, caused our currency to go from ILS, Israeli shekel, to NIS, New Israeli shekel, shekel chadash, or shkalim chadashim. That's where the name comes from, this major economic upheaval in the 1980s. And this song is a protest song during that period where it felt like the government was in cahoots with the banks, and actually it was very much in terms of allowing and not allowing certain things to happen. And so this song was very much seen as a protest against what was happening. Now, it's also interesting that this was sung by someone in that Mizrahi genre, because it also is about their claims of discrimination and racism for many decades up until the late 1970s, when they, with the change from a labor government to Likud winning the premiership for the first time. So it's talking a lot in economic terms, right? Those first two songs were about security, were about war and peace. This is not about war and peace. You're not going to hear that here. And let's keep going so you can further see that. Anashim bochim, mechirim olim, right? People are crying. Mechirim olim. Prices, olim, are rising. Mechirim are prices, olim. We know what olim are. They rise, right? Prices are rising. Lishalem misim vegam kupat cholim. Lishalem, pay, to pay, in this case paying. Misim, taxes, so paying taxes. Vegam kupat cholim, and also kupat cholim, those of us who've made aliyah know that term, that is our universal health care, paying taxes and healthcare. En kvar avoda hakupa reka, row 10 here. En kvar avoda hakupa reka. There's no longer any work. Right? En kvar, there isn't any. Avoda, work. Sagru, hakupa reka. Sorry, hakupa reka. Kupa in this context is not about healthcare. Kupa is the cash register, meaning where you keep your money. Hakupa reka, right? So the cash on hand is empty. The register is empty. Reka is empty. En mima lichyot sagru et halishka. En mima lichyot. There isn't in mima from which lichyot, to live, right? There's nothing to live on. Sagru et halishka. They closed. Sagru et halishka, the office. Lishka or misrad can both mean office. Here, lishka can be both office, but it can also refer to lishkat ta'asuka, right? The unemployment office. And that's usually with the term every day in Hebrew. When we say the word lishka, it usually refers to a larger bureaucratic office, right? So the office is closed. We can take that office to mean just a place of work or the unemployment office. Remember, 1980s, we're talking about this economic crisis. Understandably, unemployment soared as well. The office is closed. The office is closed, right? They closed the office, right? But that does translate better into English as the office is closed. Okay, let's listen to the second part of this stanza, and then we'll translate together. And then actually we'll keep going through the next chorus, and then we'll get to the next stanza. Just open it up here.
בכנסת הם יושבים, עלינו הם עובדים, לקחו החסכונות, הלכו הפיצויים, לנו כבר נמאס, דפקו לנו עוד כנס, גם על החלב, הוסיפו את המס, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה מיוחדת במינה, ממשלה דורשת, כסף מבקשת, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה.
Okay, we're gonna stop it there before we get to the next stanza, just to get through this part here. Okay. Bakneset hem yoshvim. Oh, sorry, we're not back on the thing. Sorry, just 1 second. There it is. Share the screen. Back to our lyrics. Okay. Bakneset hem yoshvim, alenu hem ovdim. Okay, Bakneset, in the Knesset, hem yoshvim, they sit. In the Knesset, they sit. Alenu hem ovdim. Okay, alenu hem ovdim, on us, or about us, hem ovdim. La'avod al is a idiom in Hebrew. La'avod means to work. Okay, so ovdim works, but la'avod al someone is to work over someone, or in other words, to take advantage of them. Just like we say in English, I'm working him over. It's the same thing as to take advantage of someone. So alenu hem ovdim. Instead of they work for us, alenu bishvilenu, ovdim bishvilenu, or bishvilenu hem ovdim, or lema'anenu, for our sake, hem ovdim. It's alenu hem ovdim. They're working us over. They're working us over. Lakhu החסכונות, הלכו הפיצויים. They took, לקחו, they took, החסכונות, they took our savings, but they took savings. חסכונות are savings. הלכו הפיצויים, I always forget how to translate this word, but we use it all the time in Hebrew. Pitsuim are reimbursements. When you are fired or laid off from work here in Israel, you are entitled to pitsuim to a certain extent based on how long you worked there and the causes of which you were fired. So you can think of this as it's a bit of severance pay. It's also just reimbursement in general. We use this term if you're returning something to a store, for example. So the reimbursements are gone. Okay. לנו כבר נמאס, דפקו לנו עוד קנס. לנו כבר נמאס. נמאס לי is an expression in Hebrew that means I'm tired, I'm sick of something. נמאס לנו, we are sick, we are tired of something. נמאס לנו כבר, or לנו כבר נמאס. We're already fed up, right? We've been fed up. דפקו לנו עוד קנס. דפקו is the verb לדפוק, which means to knock or to strike. It also in slang Hebrew is a graphic way of saying something sexual towards someone. So to knock someone over or to screw someone over is the other way to think about it. They knocked us over the head with another lanu od knas. Knas is a fine. It's a penalty. It's another form of taxation. Been fed up. We've already been fed up. They hit us, right? They hit us with another fine. Gam al hechalav hosifu et hamas. Also on chalav, milk, hosifu et hamas. They added the tax onto milk, right? Remember in Israel, milk and other basic subsidies, basic foodstuffs are under a government subsidy, what we call in Hebrew pikuach, right? So he's saying it's so bad, even the basic foods here in Israel, they're taxing. Like even milk, they have to put a tax on. So even on milk, there's been an added tax. Okay, and then he sings the lyrics again, the chorus again, Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina me'ohedet b'mina. It's a slightly different line here. Mimshala doreshet, kesef mevakeshet. Mimshala doreshet, Mimshala we said is government. The government, doreshet, demands. Kesef mevakeshet. It demands, it's asking for money, right? Money it requests. Kesef, money, mevakeshet, requests. Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina. Okay, let's listen to the last stanza and then we'll break. If you have any questions, this is a great time to start writing them in the Q&A, as I'll only be looking at that. If you have any questions about anything else, please write that in the chat. Let's get to our last stanza that we're going to listen to and then translate together. Just a second.
יש לנו שרים, רק כיסא רוצים, לא עושים דבר ורק מבטיחים. איפה השוויון? איפה החזון? איפה המוסר? איזה ביזיון? מה אשיר לכם ומה אספר? יש דברים רבים עליהם נוותר, למרות הבלגן והחסרונות, את מדינתנו לדורי דורות. איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה מיוחדת במינה. ממשלה לוחצת, מדינה נלחצת. איזו מדינה, איזו מדינה.
Okay, it keeps going. The chorus is Medina. I just want to play that last stanza so we could translate it together. So what does he sing here? Yesh lanu sarim rak kiseh rotzim. We have We've talked about this word sar before. It means a government minister, a minister. We have ministers. רק כיסא רוצים. They only want a seat, right? They only want their place of their title. They only want a seat. לא עושים דבר ורק מבטיחים, right? They לא עושים דבר, they don't do anything. ורק מבטיחים, and only promise, or only make promises. איפה השוויון? איפה, where? שוויון, equality. איפה החזון? Where's the vision? Chazon is vision in the sense of prophetic vision, right? Your vision, your aims, your aspirations. When we talk about, I talked about the Nevi'im as being the context for all of our Shirei Mach'ah, right? The prophets, biblical prophets in terms of protest songs. Often those books start with Chazon and then the name of that prophet. Okay, so the same thing here. Efo HaChazon, where's the vision? Efo HaMusar, Musar is ethics, morality, you can also translate it as. Where's the morality? Eze bizayon, what a disgrace, what contempt, right? Eze is like when Ezo Medina, here it's the masculine, and it's the same thing. What a, followed by a noun, exclamation point. What a disgrace. Ma ashir lachem u'ma asaper. What ashir, I will sing, lachem to you, uma, and what, asaper, what will I tell? So what shall I sing to you? And what shall I sing to you? And what shall I tell? Right? Yesh dvarim rabim aleim nevater. Right? What is there to say? Yesh dvarim rabim alehem nevater. Yesh dvarim rabim. There are many things. Right? Yesh, there are, or there is. Dvarim, things. Rabim, many. Alehem nevater. Or just change the order of the words, because this is a song, it's poetry, so we have a little bit more flexibility with the word order. So yesh dvarim rabim nevater alehem. Shed nevater alehem, if I was to say it in regular Hebrew, non-poetic Hebrew. There's many things we need to give up. Okay, there are many things which we there are many things which will give up. Meaning we'll have to give up, right? He's talking about there's no money, there's no jobs, we're not getting any help. Where's the morality? What a disgrace. There are many things we'll have to give up. And then what is he saying? Lamrot habalagan ve'achesronot. Lamrot, despite. Habalagan, you know that word well. Balagan, chaos. Ve'achesronot. And chesronot. Chesronot is a great word. Chisaron is the opposite of yitaron, right? We've talked about the word chisaron, and its root. It's shoresh, which is chet samech resh. It has the same root as chaser, lacking. Choser is a lack of something. So chesronot, disadvantages or drawbacks. So despite Lamrot habalagan ve'achesronot, despite the chaos and the drawbacks, what is he saying? At medinatenu ledorei dorot. You are our state, our country. Ledorei dorot, for generations to come. And then sings again, Ezo Medina, Ezo Medina. Right? This is, again, a classic song from that was situated in the 1980s 1980s economic crisis, but has been used by every political movement you can think of in Israel to reference what they think is wrong with the state or the government or something like that. So much so, it's really popular. Across, like I said, political, ideological, sociological divides, this song is well recognized. It still plays on the radio. It'll play, if it plays at a wedding that's a little odd, as up-tempo as it is, that would be a little weird, but I'm sure there are some weddings that do that. But what I want to give you is a little insight into some of these songs that, especially nowadays with what's happening here in Israel and wherever you fall on the positions or what's happening, is good to know these songs, the context in which Israelis voice their opinions, not just politically and civically, but also culturally. Okay, let me stop here as I see we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Okay. Karen, please type the name of the music website. We'll send out the link when we send out the link, the recording of this, as well as the vocab spreadsheet, but it's SHIRONET, Shironet. Okay. Okay, sorry, there's a whole bunch of questions. Some of them relate to the class. I'm trying to get those through first and then move forward. Lawrence, what is the name of the movie again from that second song? It's the name of that song, Shtei Etzbaot Mitzidon. Okay, we'll send out the link for the song as well so you can listen along to the rest of it, but that's the name of it. Martha, what does lamrot mean? Lamrot, this word here. Sorry. Lamrot in row 28 here. Lamrot means despite. Okay, despite, notwithstanding, any of those words. Okay, let me get to some questions that don't have to do with today's class, but there's some really interesting ones here. I want to get to as many of them as I can. Cecil asks that he knows Sidur Tanakh Hebrew, how approximately long should it take me to feel comfortable with modern? That's really a hard question to answer, Cecil or Cecil, however you say your name. It's a subjective thing. How people learn is very much varying. Some people it takes 30, 40 hours. Sometimes it's more. It's really about practice, but really making sure, as I say always in this class, contextualize Sidur Tanakh Hebrew as a different language. Sometimes it'll help, most of the times it won't. Think of it as a different language that sounds very familiar, very similar to what you already know. Martha, can you expand on La'azazel? La'azazel comes from Tanakh, from the Bible. We have the verses that deal with Yom Kippur, how it was to be celebrated in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and then in Beit HaMikdash, in the temple in Jerusalem, and the idea that two goats would be given for slaughter. One would carry the sins of the people, and it would be sent, it would be called the Seir La'azazel, the goat that would be sent to La'azazel. La'azazel, Azazel in, it's not explained in that specific biblical verse. It has become to mean anything from a place, a physical place that the goat was sent, or to a demon perhaps. A lot of demons in Jewish tradition end with the name of God at the end of them. To all sorts of different things, but Azazel in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, is referred to when we talk about hell. Remember, Jewish tradition is much more complicated when it comes to hell. I'm not getting into that conversation now, but just know when we say someone lech la'azazel in Hebrew, it means go to hell as a curse. Someone asks more about that website, Shironet. Let me just open it up since we're already talking about it again. Someone had a question about it. Let me just see if I can find it again. Nope, 1 second. Let me pull it up. There it is. Escape. Okay. Share screen. Right, so here's the website with all the different songs called Shironet. Shironet. You can see it at the top of the screen. And this is part of the Mako media conglomerate. We've talked about Mako before. Mako is a media conglomerate in Israel. It includes Channel 12 on TV. It's part of the Keshet group. Keshet is both a production company as well as a distribution and broadcasting. So it includes news, it includes entertainment, it includes its own series, and it bought this website that used to be independent called Shironet. Karen, great question. How would you recommend to read about the financial crisis in the 1980s? I know this may sound trite, but I promise you, read it on Wikipedia. It is a really well-researched, well-referenced and footnoted article. It's called the 1983 Israel Bank Crisis, I think it's called, or Bank Stock Crisis. It's a great read, really in depth. We could spend multiple lessons just talking about that, but it's a great, easy read in English. Lily, how come so many Israeli songs are so oriental? So Lily, like I said, there are many different genres of Israeli music. One very popular one is what we call muzika mizrachit, oriental, which is a very outdated word, and I used it as well, but we talk about that word mizrahi because it's also outdated, because mizrahi, Eastern, literally, goes all the way from Morocco in the west to India in the east. Right, and to call Morocco, which is farther west than Eastern Europe, east also doesn't make sense. But it's a whole genre. It's one of many genres in Israel. You can find rock, you can find electronic music, hip hop, jazz, classical music, all different kinds here. It's popular because, remember, most of Israeli Jewish population come from Muslim countries. Right, and that's where this music comes from as well. The inspiration from it comes from that. This country is predominantly native-born Israeli and what we call Mizrahi or Sfaradi, right, as opposed to Ashkenazi. We're still all one big country with all sorts of different people, and as the song from the musical goes, Kulanu Yehudim, we're all Jews, even though there is 20% of the population that are not Jews. The point, though, is whether you are Mizrahi, Sfaradi or not, people very much like muzika mizrachit. It's a stand at many weddings and other celebrations to hear it. It's popular throughout the country. At national celebrations, it's heard. It's its own sound. Zoe, are there contemporary songs about today's high-tech and buzz society? That's a great question, Zoe. There are songs that reference it, not in a protest context like we're talking about here. There are ones that talk about moving abroad for work and for other purposes. They would talk about hustle and bustle of life. There's lots of songs, for example, because Tel Aviv and the high-tech scene have become synonymous with one another, even though there are plenty of other high-tech startups and centers in the country other than the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. So there's a lot to talk about Tel Aviv. So there's a lot of those types of songs. We could do a whole lesson on that. That's actually a great idea, Zoe. Thank you for that. And also, do children in Israel learn the old songs? Absolutely. Just as we learn these songs as we're learning about Israel in Hebrew, so too, these songs are well referenced, right? They are heard on a regular basis. If you watch any event that happens around national days of commemoration, like Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, you'll hear those as well. And we resume class right when those come up. So we'll also give you that cultural context to know what to listen to as well as what to participate and expect. But that's a great question. These songs are definitely a part of the Israeli cultural canon, as it were. Yes, Irene, like I said, 20% is Arabs, but that also includes immigrants to Israel who are neither Arab nor Jewish. It's, again, a whole other conversation. You can look at the demographics of Israel on Wikipedia and everywhere else. Israel is quite diverse, both in its Jewish population, it's what we call Arab population, and its other population that often gets lumped into that 20%. Okay, we need to stop here as it is past 9 o'clock. As always, toda rabah, thank you all so much for joining. Like I said, we are taking a inter-semester break. We will resume right after Pesach. You will get an email, not just with this lesson and with the updated vocabulary from last lesson and from this lesson. You'll also get an update and reminder as to when we resume class, which, if I'm not mistaken, is, let me just quickly look at a calendar, will be April, which will be April 17th. Okay, we will be back here on April 17th together, and we're going to be talking about Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut, all the really important big national days here in Israel, as well as any questions you have. Please write us at by email with your requests for topics you'd like us to cover in advance. Not just Toda Rabah, but Purim Sameach. Have a happy Purim next week, and Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Have a happy, healthy Pesach, Passover in a month from now. See you all very soon. Lihitraot.